Hi guys, my name's Matt Harris. I've been a stonemason since 1990 after doing my apprenticeship in the UK in Oxford, and I'm just doing a little chat about how to make lime mortars and in particular hot mix. The sand that we're using today is a quartz based engineered sand. It's got fines in it which aren't silt or clay, they are just pure fines, and it's a well graded quartz sand, and we're just about to put the quicklime in with the mix, let it mix up, and we'll add the water. Okay, so this is the quicklime going in. Get everything in there. Give it a spin. So that's about 20 litres of water that's gone in there, and I'll need to add some more as well because it really does take an enormous amount of juice to create decent lime mortar. The quicklime will soon heat up. I reckon that will start to heat up in maybe 5 minutes, so we'll come back in a sec. So what I've done here, I've put 3 sand to 1 quicklime. It won't end up as 3 to 1. It will be more like 2.5 to 1 because the quicklime gets really fatty and expands in the mix, and I can start to feel the heat on the side of the drum now as it's starting to heat up. The beauty of this is once it's got most of the heat off, you can then put it into buckets, and then you can store it in those buckets for long periods of time. As long as there's no air getting into those buckets, they can last forever, basically. Now, I have used this mortar when it's as hot as this before. It's ideal when you're fixing. So if you want to start a job and you don't want the stones at the bottom to move whilst you're putting stones above it, having it hot like this is really good idea. It doesn't quite have a set, but it does seem to sort of go off. It gets really quite hard at the bottom, and it will lock the stone into position. I've also grouted by mistake using quicklime, and that's pushed the wall out because the expansion is quite significant. We had to take the wall back down again and rebuild it, unfortunately, but it does work incredibly well, and you can use it hot. Would I use it hot all the time? No, because leaving it to slake for a period of time, it really does improve its malleability and its stickiness. And that's what you want when you're pointing. You want it to be sticky. You want it to stick to your trowel. You don't want it to be falling off. So when you get the trowel on it and it does that straight away, you don't want that. You want your trowel to be upside down and the mortar to be able to stick to it. So that's what I do. I'll put it into a bucket after this and leave it to slake. And in the future, I'll use it in a few months' time. So the sand is really important when you're using mortar. This particular sand is high in quartz. It's a engineered sand, and you get that lovely crackle. And I don't get any residue on my hands there at all. There's no sort of stickiness, no brownness to the fingers, and it's just dust. And that's what you want. You want it to be dusty, You don't want it to be clay. You don't. They're the things that will crack your mortar. They aren't the best thing for mortar, because if you've got a clay in there, water then needs to come out of that clay, and when water comes out of clay, it shrinks and cracks, and you end up with cracks in your mortar, and that's when it starts pulling off the wall, and it's not ideal. It takes so much more work to keep it from drying out too quick when you're trying to cure your lime mortars in the wall. So this is a bucket of mortar that I made a number of months ago, and you can see how hard it is. Now, it's absolutely ideal for pointing because you can add a tiny amount of water. I've not put any water over the top because I wanted it to be really dry as I possibly can make it. Because the worst thing in the world is when you're repointing and the mortar's way too wet and just sloppy going in the mortar, in the joint, and the water again has to come out, and then it cracks, and it's just rubbish to work with. So with this, I'll hack it out of this bucket, put it into another bucket, and whisk it. I've got a Milwaukee whisk, battery operated Milwaukee whisk, absolutely perfect for stuff like this. And I'll whisk it for between 10 and 20 minutes. The more you whisk it, the more pliable it gets. If you need to add a tiny little bit of water, but I'll leave that up to your own judgment for how wet you want it. This is for pointing. I don't use it for bedding. Well, you can, but it's quite an expensive process to do. So what I tend to do is I'll use like a fat sand for fixing, and so it's a cheaper sand. This is quite an expensive sand. So for bedding, you want something quite easily malleable, so you can keep on fixing. This is my pointing sand. So if I'm doing sandstone or brickwork, this is the type of mortar that I'll use. This is quite a small Baron force-action mixer. It's only 80 litres maximum. Now, I've added about 30, maybe just under 30 litres of water to the mix on this, and I'll get 3 buckets of mortar out of this. And when it's time to take it out, it's not cold by any stretch. The heat's come off this. There's still a bit of heat there still, but as it's so small, I'm going to just take it out, put it into buckets, and it will get quite hard in those buckets because it's still got some heat inside it. But again, which is what I was talking about earlier, it will dry the mix to a certain extent. I'll put a lid on top so no more water can evaporate. And what you want is almost a donut of when the mortar's been going round. It will look quite nice. But you just add a tiny little bit more water to this, and you'll see the effect fairly quickly. You get almost like a donut universe. And then you know it's about ready to come out the mixer. And there we go, there's your donut. It's not just about how much lime goes in and how much sand goes in. It's about judging the quantities that you need for the particular job that you're using. I've used mortars like this to maybe a 6-in-1 if I'm bedding and I don't particularly want a very strong mix, because that's not what the original building had. What I've used today, I've used a 15-litre bucket. I've put 3 sand and 1 quicklime, and then added the water to suit. Like I said, don't overwater it straight away. You've got to be there looking at it. You can't just walk away for a long period of time and expect your mortar to be absolutely fine. You've got to be on it, and that's why I'm saying you get the biggest mixer your electric capacities can hold. If you have a 3-phase, then do so. Get the biggest mixer you can. If you can't, if you're just single phase, get a bigger mixer than this is my advice. It's great for travelling on site with, but for just doing a couple of mixes, you don't want to be stood here all day just for 3 buckets of mortar. So we're just putting the mortar into buckets now, and it's got a lot more sticky than it was earlier. So it's really sticking to the trowel, and that's what you want when you're repointing, is to have that malleability and stickability to the trowel. So when you come to use your pointing trowel and you come up to here, and you can actually put it in the wall without it falling onto the floor before you put it in the wall. The glorious thing about lime mortars is you can add so many different things to them. People have had, they would add milk, ox blood. You can even put tallow in there, which is basically beef fat. This all gives different properties. Now I've used tallow with lime wash, and it just basically gives it almost like a waterproof ability. The other thing you can use iron sulfites, and that will change the colour to some quite a vivid orangey colour, and it's quite beautiful. You can use copper sulfites to give it the blue, and you can also use ochre, which gives it a lovely pinkish colour. But these are all the natural products you can use to change the colour. You can also use a small amount of oxide. It's recommended not to use vast amounts, but I use it just to tone the colour down, stop it from being bright white in the wall, and because it will go much whiter than this once it's in the wall. So you can also add hair to the mix. White horse's hair is best. A lot of plasterers use nylon. I don't particularly like using nylon because it's a plastic and eventually it will degrade, where hair won't. It will start. I've seen hair from the early 18th century in mortar mixes, and it was actually horsehair that they just brushed the horses and used that hair, put it in the mix and pointed with it, and the mortar itself was quite weak, but it was still really good condition because the hair was binding it all together. I don't tend to use that because the sand that I use is of a type that will keep the mortar together. It's irregular shapes, all different sizes, and so that gives it the strength that you need, and the lime gives it the bind. So the lime doesn't give it the strength, it's the sand that gives it the strength.